Good afternoon. I'm Susan Thomas. I'm the Interim Dean of Library Services at Indiana University South Bend, and I am the room facilitator for this session. This session is Sustainability, Open Science, and Scholarly Communication. And I have a few reminders to you before we get started. A reminder that there's a code of conduct for the conference, and it's available on the conference website. And then also, if you have questions or comments, please use the microphones on either side of the room. Unfortunately, they're not mobile, so you'll need to get up and go to those. All right, so then let's get started.
Thank you, Lisa. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for this afternoon session. I'll let you know this is my first Charleston conference, so I'm very excited to be here and to talk about the Sustainable Development Goals today. So our session is Sustainability, Open Science, and Scholarly Communication, and there are 4 of us here today, and so we'll just introduce ourselves as we talk about our portion of the session today. So my name is Robin Keir. I'm a liaison librarian at the University of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I have been a librarian for almost 25 years, and so I'm excited to be here to talk today. My talk will have two main areas, my portion. The first is an introduction to Sustainable Development Goals and library work. And the second area is related to specific suggestions for concrete ways that university libraries especially can do this, and the ways that that can help with strategic thinking for university libraries around the Sustainable Development Goals. So what are the SDGs? They are also known as the global goals. So I just want to introduce this in case, to refresh your memory or to familiarize with the acronym that we will all be using. So they were adopted by all the United Nations member states in 2015 as a universal call to action to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure that all people enjoy peace and prosperity. And the goals have a target of 2030. So sometimes they're called the 2030 SDGs. These 17 goals are intersectional in that they recognize that action in one area affects the outcomes in other areas, and development must balance social, economic, and environmental sustainability. So they encompass ending poverty, as I've said, promoting gender equality, providing quality education, everything from clean energy, clean water, and peaceful societies. So what is the role of libraries in this work? On a broad level, libraries are key partners in this. Achieving all the goals, I feel, depends on libraries and information sharing. If you are familiar with IFLA, which is the International Federation of Library Associations, they have been actively involved with the creation and the promotion of these UN 2030 SDGs from 2014 through the present, advocating for the inclusion of access to information, safeguarding of cultural heritage, literacy, and access to information and communication technologies in the framework. And as I said, they're all intersectional, and libraries can contribute to almost all the goals. All types of libraries, professional associations, and cultural heritage organizations are involved in this work. Doing this work and connecting it to the SDGs also makes it easier for libraries to advocate at the local, regional, and state level. So what can we do in libraries? Libraries play a big part in helping to provide the knowledge resources to communities. When we are providing information at the local level, we are providing the resources, skills, and tangible ways to achieve the goals of the SDGs. So I pulled out a few examples here These first three slides actually come from the American Library Association UN SDG Task Force. That was a year-long task force that I was involved in, and we looked at each type of library and how each kind of library can support the goals, and I pulled out three here from university libraries especially. That's my focus today. Supporting entrepreneurship and innovation initiatives on campus, for example. Providing community programming for these topics. Supporting faculty and student research, which we're going to talk a lot more about, through collections, consultations, and subject librarian expertise. For example, libraries facilities, pursuing LEED certification, zero waste, and other options also contribute to the SDG goals. So how can academic libraries help universities advance the SDGs? I want to talk about weave two of these together, and as they relate to our next three speakers. Access to research and data, and tying that to a strategic agenda for your university library. Advancing open access. I mean, we know this. This conference has many sessions on the next three slides that I have. Advocating for these in your university's research materials, allowing for equitable use of these materials, publicizing those kinds of materials to your community. For example, there's a research guide. Your scholarly communications, having the institutional repositories available, having access to preprints, and having access to the research materials that people need to do the research to advance the goals. You will hear more from our other panelists about various related initiatives that publishers are working on that libraries can take advantage of when incorporating these into library strategy. Advancing open educational resources as a related initiative at my university as well, which is, my librarians at the University of Pittsburgh are involved with this. This is also another way to help faculty make things open and use resources, reuse resources, perhaps create new resources, funding for open education initiatives, and again, promoting those to your community. Another open slide here, the advancing open research, and I know again this is a topic that has been talked about at this conference. It's the Nelson memo, the August policy update from the Office of Science, OSTP, Office of Science, Technology, and Policy, providing public access to federally funded research publications and data sharing. So what does this mean for libraries, especially research-intensive university libraries like mine and others? What does it mean to provide access to that kind of data? How can it be done? What will the federal requirements be? How will the federal government assist with making the public access to those publications? So this is an important role for libraries to consider in our next 5 years, in our strategies. How will we make all of this available? So university researchers are working in all of the areas of the SDG, and the discoverability is key. As you will hear throughout our presentations. And I think that these also tie to sustainability efforts. Libraries think this is important. Our universities think this is important. For example, I know many U.S. universities have their sustainability office. They have a sustainability officer. They're working on various initiatives across campus in all kinds of areas. However, I think this is a key area where university libraries can strategize to work with those offices to help them understand how the SDG research is discoverable. And that's also where vendor and publication partners come in for libraries. We have a chance to promote that SDG research to faculty, not only to our faculty on campus, and to show its impact and to show how it's discoverable, but also to the sustainability offices that need to file various kinds of reports about their efforts and what their researchers are doing, right, at your institution. I think that the kinds of things that are being developed are very important for those goals. They can help not only the SDGs, but they can help libraries in this work. I just want to mention a few active library groups to watch in this area. I mentioned the American Library Association SDG group. There are many IFLA resources about connecting libraries and information work to the SDGs. Last year, the OCLC Global Council of FY21 actually focused and had various webinars that you can still view on SDGs and libraries. And then there is also something called the SDG Publishers Compact Fellows, which Clarice is going to talk more about. All right, so thank you. That was my portion. And then we will move into Lucy.
Thanks, Robin. Good afternoon. Thanks so much for being here. My name is Lucy Frisch, and I am the Director of Content Marketing Strategy at Springer Nature. Today I'm going to give you a very brief overview of how we as a publisher are working to support the communities that we serve in addressing the Sustainable Development Goals, and also how our SDG program is inherently aligned with our transition to open access and open research. So when we at Springer Nature talk about helping to make true societal impact with the research that we publish, I think looking at Springer Nature's overall network really helps illustrate the power, and I would also argue the moral obligation that we have to really influence and support real-world change. We have many strong, globally recognized and trusted brands that are managed by over 10,000 employees globally. We actually have an updated revenue number of 1.7 billion since I made this slide. We work to support authors in the publishing of thousands of books and journal articles, and especially within our marketing organization, we work just as hard to make sure that content is widely used, harnessing our reach and convening power to help share and communicate this research around the world. In order to optimize the reach of the research that's published with us, we're really committed to the transition to opening up all aspects of research, including data, code, protocols, preprints, and the version of record. It's really critical that we make this research more accessible, and we've recognized this with some key initiatives already, such as ResearchGate, our partnership with ResearchGate, and as well as Shared It. But when we think about why this transition really matters, I think it's important to kind of humanize the impact that it's already having, particularly for our authors as well as for society at large. So I think all of us, through our collective experience with COVID-19 in particular, we saw how much humanity benefited from the speed up in the scientific discovery of published research. And I think we've witnessed that it's possible to move mountains when it comes to life-saving information and getting it into the hands of those who desperately need it. So that's why Springer Nature's commitment to open access and open research is necessarily so intertwined with our commitment to the Sustainable Development Goals. Robin gave a fantastic introduction to the SDGs already, if you weren't already familiar with them. And the ambition, like she mentioned, is for these goals to be met by 2030, but as Dr. Mambutata addressed in her keynote address yesterday morning, we're not really on track. We are definitively not on track to achieve these goals by 2030. So what is it that we can do, I think, is the main question. On the Springer Nature side, in 2016, we launched our Grand Challenges program, which was then reframed in 2019 so that we could specifically address the Sustainable Development Goals and encourage the publication of research to inform the development of solutions to these challenges and that the goals set out to address. In 2020, as Robin also mentioned, the International Publishers Association launched the SDG Publishers Compact specifically to galvanize the wider publishing industry, and I know Clarice is going to discuss this further. We were an early signatory of this compact, working to develop resources to help the commitments, to bring these commitments that the compacts have to life. We set up the SDG program at Springer Nature to make sure that trustworthy research on important topics gets the attention that it desperately needs outside of the scholarly arena. And we recognize that the increasing challenges that researchers are being met with to make true societal impact, and we're actively acquiring and promoting SDG relevant content for that reason. From 2015 to 2021, we published nearly 400,000 journal articles, journal articles or book chapters relevant to the goals. And this year we actually published our 2000th OA book. So we know that OA publications receive higher reach, downloads, and citations than their non-OA counterparts, which goes back to why our SDG program and our OA transition goals are necessarily intertwined. I find this data to be really interesting. It shows kind of how far we've come with the SDG program, or kind of having the data to back it up a bit. So we recently undertook a pretty thorough analysis of the markets of published research relating to the SDGs using Digital Sciences Dimensions database, which classifies articles to the SDGs using a machine learning technique. SDG articles, they don't make up an overwhelming segment of the market, but it's a segment that's seeing really rapid growth, and more articles are being published on these topics. Research relating to the SDGs outgrew the market for all academic articles by about 10 percentage points across different business models from 2017 to 2021. And as you can see here, the average annual growth rate in this time period for SDG articles, and I should specify these are for the whole market as covered by Dimensions, and not just for Springer Nature published SDG-related articles. That average annual growth rate was 17% compared to 5.5% for non-SDG articles. So if we look at these business models and we kind of take that one step further and we analyze the rate of growth of SDG articles by publishing model, we see that SDG articles published in fully OA journals grew by over 26% compared to a 12% growth rate in subscription or hybrid journals. So this data really reinforces the fact that research, which is critical to enact that real-world change to address the SDGs, it should be published openly in order to have the opportunity to make the greatest impact on global challenges such as the SDGs. So our commitment to open access publishing really underpins our approach. If we want to make sure that SDG content is available to those who are best placed to put it into practice and really make those changes in the world, then facilitating that opening of the access to that content is really an important way of doing this. I also just wanted to highlight that articles related to the SDGs also receive much higher altmetric scores than non-SDG related articles, which indicates that they gain more non-academic attention as well. I also wanted to bring to your attention a case study. So speaking of non-academic attention, as we know, publishing research open access gives it a higher likelihood of making an impact beyond academia, and that's where policy change is happening. So this was a project that we took on with the Association of Universities in the Netherlands, who really share our belief in the power of research to address societal grand challenges, and they also share our commitment to opening up science. We pioneered a read and publish agreement with them in 2015, and then in 2018, we entered into a new strategic partnership to really investigate whether and how open research facilitates progress towards solving global challenges, and how we can really help that. One of the key takeaways of the white paper titled Open for All that we jointly published with VSNU is that open access articles relating to the SDGs are downloaded and shared more than subscription access articles relating to the SDGs. But we also saw in the survey data that users who were not themselves conducting and publishing research were much less likely to be able to access the full text of subscription articles on our platforms. And this would suggest that increased downloads of societally relevant articles that are open access is the result of them reaching more people outside of our core audiences. For example, those who reported that they worked in medical or healthcare organizations, corporations, government organizations, consultancies, NGOs, charities, just to name a few. The people who are really working on the ground to solve these societal problems. And finally, One question we ask ourselves a lot, so I come from originally the author services side of Springer Nature, and from that perspective we ask ourselves a lot, like how can we better support researchers in their quest of making greater societal impact? And there are a lot of barriers to getting research in the hands of change makers outside academia who need to understand the findings to make informed decisions, but who don't necessarily have the context or the access to that research. So as part of the aforementioned project with VSNU, we also consulted 13 senior career researchers who had significant experience in making societal impact with their work, and we developed the Springer Nature Societal Impact Toolkit, which is filled with steps and guided advice to help researchers create an impact plan for their research. In this toolkit, we really prompt researchers to take advantage of their institution's resources that they might not have thought about, and also demonstrate how their peers have approached it successfully before them. That's all for me, and over to Clarice for now.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Clarice. I'm with Cabbels. I've entitled my portion of this panel a collaborative effort across the entire landscape of the academic community. And I want to emphasize that each of us is a gear turning within the SDG research mechanism. I think we all see the SDGs and sustainability, through our own lenses, whether that be, colored by personal experiences or colored by, the way our role functions within the scientific community. But I want to emphasize that, this isn't a one-lane road, and I think it would be great if everyone could sort of remove the blinders, so to speak, take the goggles off, and understand that it's going to be a collaborative effort across the entire landscape of academia to really make the goals happen. And if they're going to happen by 2030, that's up in the air. But and I think we all understand very well that taking an idea from research to publication to implementation involves a vast array of moving parts and individuals and organizations, and it's very difficult to get that research into the hands of those. It's a long process, long pipeline to get that research into the hands of those that are going to implement it, the practitioners. So what can you do within your role? I have a list of sort of the major roles. I'm so terribly sorry if I've left out someone's role in the room, but I tried to grab the main ones. And we're all trying to work together here to push forward the SDG agenda, push forward SDG research. But I'd like to call your attention to the SDG Publishers Compact Fellows. My associates here mentioned that a couple of times. I've just become a fellow, and I'm very excited to share with you guys what the group does and who they are. So I'm going to provide you with some context, some history, and then how they can help you have some resources and some structure if you're wanting to create some SDG initiatives within your organization. So Hesse, which is the Higher Education Sustainability Initiative, in short, is a UN partnership between some UN entities, and they are trying to push the SDG agenda forward within higher education. And they create action groups specific to certain spheres within academia, within higher education, one of them being the SDG Publishers Compact, which is specifically for academic publishing. And then the SDG Publishers Compact Fellows are a group of representatives from organizations who are signatories of the compact. And I like to think of the fellows as sort of the boots on the ground who are really trying to push forward action within all of the different roles and spheres within academia and the scientific landscape. So I have here the purpose, the mission, and the vision of the fellows. And you'll notice that practical tools and actionable guidance is in bold. And the fellows provide practical tools and actionable guidance in the form of these top action tips. And we got some tips for you guys. A tip for everybody. You get a tip, you get a tip, you get a tip. So academic publishers, academic librarians, authors, practitioners, we have different, basically they're lists of suggestions on what you can do to create action and maybe start an SDG initiative within your organization. So if you're an individual that doesn't have any kind of SDG initiative within your organization and you're interested in getting that started, this is a great place to begin. Or maybe you are part of an organization that has an SDG initiative, but you're trying to maybe strike some interest in another role that intersects with yours or overlaps with yours. These are some great resources to share with people. And I just pulled their PDFs on our website, and you can download them straight from the website. And I just pulled the one for academic librarians, so I thought that would be relevant. But like I said, they're just lists of suggestions. So circling back to this slide, I wanted to touch on how the vendor's role is relevant to this whole SDG agenda. I think any good vendor is going to listen to the market, listen to their target audience, and I think SDGs are sort of becoming a trend, and I'm hoping that we're going to see more vendors and more people like that incorporating SDGs within their platforms and within their products. So cabbels is a vendor, and if you don't know much about cabbels, just very quickly, we are a subscription service that provides journal search platforms to the academic community. And really what we're trying to do here is provide a resource so that researchers can find optimal publishing outlets. We provide information, metrics, publishing information, historical trends on specific vetted journals, and we also have another platform that identifies predatory publishers. So that's a little bit about who we are and what we do. So what are we doing with SDGs? Cabbels is currently partnering with St. Joseph's University School of Business on a project called the SDGii, or the SDG Impact Intensity. And basically, in short, what it is a different way of journal evaluation, not just your regular old citation-based metrics or something like that. It's we're rating journals based on their SDG output. If you would like to know more about that, we have a dashboard where you can see our pilot 100 journals there. And then if you'd like to know more about St. Joseph's and the work that they're doing measuring SDG research, they're doing a lot more stuff than just the journal evaluation. They have a paper out, and they also have their own dashboard as well. So I say all that to say, time's a ticking on these SDG goals. 2030 is right around the corner. So I think action, I encourage you to create action in whatever role you may have. And I also encourage you to take the blinders off and understand that this will be a community effort, and we're probably not going to get there unless we work together. So I leave you with the words of Elvis. I think we need a little less conversation, a little more action, please.
Hey, thanks so much, and thanks, Elvis. So my name is Laura Helmuth. I'm the editor-in-chief of Scientific American, and I'm going to talk about kind of the next stage, if you think about the progression of research on SDGs, as starting with what are the goals, what is the research, how is it published, how is it distributed, and I'm sort of at the phase of dissemination of translating, reporting, presenting information to the general public, we call it consumer media, and helping important work come to the attention of the public at large, of policymakers, of educators, of early career scientists, of any scientist, of anybody who's interested. And so Scientific American, we've been around for a while. We just celebrated our 177th anniversary. We're the oldest continuous publication in the United States. We now publish news stories, a lot of opinion and commentary, podcast videos of all kinds of science and scholarship, and we're written, our pieces are written by experts or by journalists. We've published Albert Einstein, like literally Einstein. You don't have to be Einstein to publish with us. We publish a lot of early career people now, and we're trying to use our platform to really think about how can we amplify the voices of people who haven't gotten the attention they deserve in science historically. And the way that, one of the things that the SDGs do for journalists at Scientific American, at really any place that covers science, covers the environment, covers, any kind of sustainability, any kind of policy issues, the SDGs help us answer some of the biggest questions in journalism, which is, okay, what's the story? Well, here's 17 things on our to-do list. Why is it important? Who does it matter to? What's the urgency? What's the timeline? Why does this all matter? And so when articles are published that explicitly refer to SDGs because they're inspired by them, because they have some sort of implications for the pursuit of SDGs, of the Sustainable Development Goals, that really helps kind of identify to journalists that this is important and this is why it matters. This is the context it fits into, and that helps journalists help their audiences understand why something matters, how to think about it, why it deserves our attention. And so what I'm going to do here, I've just got a couple of examples of articles from Scientific American that are explicitly about SDGs and are framed, they're introduced in terms of here's something that has to do with Sustainable Development Goals, here's the latest. And so this is a news article about the latest IPCC report that basically distills, here are some of the big takeaways from the IPCC. Here's what everybody needs to know. Here's what we need to do next. And this is sort of a typical article. We wrote this. I like to think it's a little bit more insightful than some of what our competitors did, but all the major news organizations would have had articles like this that were, in some cases, very explicitly about here's how IPCC and SDGs intersect. This is a feature article we ran last year, basically by Joseph Stiglitz, saying that gross domestic product is not a good way to rank economies or to measure how they're doing or how they've been doing or how they're improving, and we need much better metrics. If we're going to talk about human thriving, and basically this is a long feature saying SDGs are what matters. And so this was another way to kind of explain to people, here's some of the world's leading economists saying we need to rethink what do economists even study, and SDGs are the things we should. So the United Nations has an SDG Media Zone that's very active, and Scientific American, we've partnered with them to do several webinars, conferences, and it's a really nice partnership, and the SDGs, like thinking about things in terms of SDGs, helps us kind of figure out where to collaborate, how to collaborate, who to bring in, what our audiences are, and so it's a really effective way to make these partnerships, and also to reach different audiences. At Scientific American, we think of who our core audiences, who are kind of larger penumbra of audiences, and then the United Nations has its own as well. And I think we learn from thinking about who one another are speaking to. And then this is just an article that came out of one of the events we did with the UN Media Zone, where we had a bunch of youth climate leaders talking on a panel about what are their big issues, what are their motivations, how are they doing the work, what are the solutions they see, and so then journalists can use our platforms to sort of amplify what they're doing and keep disseminating, help people come across who these people are, what they're doing, and so these are people from Argentina, Colombia, Kuwait, how they're learning from one another and how we can all learn from them. And then this is just a final example. Basically, everything relates to an SDG. So it should. Everything that matters relates to some sort of SDG. And I think as some of the other panelists have said, they're very intersectional. And so this is from the beginning of the pandemic. Deforestation, pandemics, human thriving. The pandemic is relevant to probably half of the SDGs or more, and in the recovery from the pandemic, it really needs to be oriented around SDGs and thinking in terms of what do we need for the world, everybody in the world to thrive? How can we do it? And the SDGs were created before the pandemic. The pandemic has changed everything. The SDGs still exist. They're more important than ever. And how can we take lessons from the pandemic and from SDGs and again learn from one another in that way? So that's just quickly, kind of how journalists think about the SDGs, how some of us are using them. This, of course, intersects with open science, open data, open access, because, of course, if the research is easy for journalists to find, and we're better at finding research than most people because that's our job, literally. So making the fruits of research easier for people to share, to come across, to report on, to write about, really helps amplify these important messages. So that's the end of our formal, yeah, semi-formal, informal presentation. One of the things I love about this conference is it's never too formal. So now we want to just open it up to talk to all of you. And this is being recorded, so if you have a question, go to one of the microphones. If you can't get there, it's uncomfortable, we can just wave and we'll move a microphone to you. And yeah, just maybe if you can, introduce yourself and say what's on your mind.
Hi, it's Eric Olson from the Center for Open Science, and I really like the gears imagery there, and its conceit that really goes layers and layers deep. And one of the things we find is that there'll be one of those gears, an academic institution will have champions or even lots of champions, but then there's a gear within a gear that gums up the works, and it'll stop something from the forward momentum. So what kind of advice do you have for those champions there, or those of us in infrastructure that are trying to help them to free up those gears so they can keep moving forward?
Is that part of your
I think so. I'm gonna take it. I just want to make sure. Thanks for the question. Yeah, I'm glad you liked my gear metaphor. No, I agree with you, and that's the whole point of the metaphor, is that everyone has to be sort of turning in tandem, and if you're not, then like you said, it gums up the works. I guess my answer to that question, I don't have a great answer, because you can't make everyone pull their weight, right? Can't force people to. So I would say gentle encouragement to those, outreach. Other organizations beyond your organization is an excellent place to start. I did mention the top action tips, so they're not just for, you're welcome to use the tips for other organizations that are on there. And most of the tips will involve how to reach out to other types of organizations as well. That's how I would answer that. Thank you.
I can just add also, I think at Springer Nature, certainly within the marketing department, having understanding what the SDG program is and kind of how that adds to our brand value, our reputation, that's one thing, but it actually is really challenging to talk about the value of the SDG program to other departments, and so showcases. So we've been doing more internal marketing of what the program means, and having monthly SDG Champions webinars where colleagues can come and learn about what other people in other parts of the business are doing in relation to the SDGs, because one of the questions I get a lot is, well, who is an SDG researcher? And like we've talked about, I mean, technically every researcher is an SDG researcher, right? But it's just framing that in a way that makes it relevant to other people across the business.
Yeah, and I think for libraries, it's about the advocacy piece is making it for public libraries. Often cities will be doing SDG reports, and so making sure that the library proves their value into those kinds of reports for their cities. That's something that Los Angeles Public Library has done, for example, very well, is using it as advocacy, so that the library is relevant in that realm for that area, and so then there's more incentive for the city, to work with them on those goals, and for the library to provide them information, and for them to work, for example. And that's also true in universities, as I was mentioning with Sustainability Office, finding partners so that it remains relevant and beneficial.
Thank you.
Hi, Kate Whitehead, Salem College in North Carolina. So particularly in the past few years, we've had this becoming increasingly popular push towards an anti-scientific viewpoint. I was wondering if you could talk about ideas of how to address this in context with the SDGs.
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's one of the most urgent problems of our time. The distrust of science, the weaponization of distrust.
It can be making, I think it can be making the research more accessible, publicly accessible. Like Laura was mentioning, the journalists, translating research sometimes into more digestible information. Yeah, it's a very difficult question for all of us. For all of us. I don't think I have a great answer. Yeah, we're all working through that.
Yeah. And yeah, go ahead.
I don't know, can you hear me? Can the principles of sustainable development be followed by other organizations? There are 16 principles, and how librarians can help other organizations to follow the sustainable development. Thank you.
Yeah, oh, sorry, do you mean other organizations besides libraries or? Oh, how can libraries help them? Oh, yeah, by promoting the kind of open research that we have to, say for nonprofits in your community. One thing I didn't mention in my slides that we're doing at my university is, community engaged scholarship. So it's working with communities for research that's beneficial for them, right? To figure out what's beneficial for them, and that includes work with community groups and nonprofits. And that work, I think, is not, as Lucy said, it's not always framed as SDG work, but it is SDG work. It's any of those goals that could be relevant to those groups. And so making the research relevant at the community level, and then with your community partners, and then making that research available and open so that it does some of the policy change that Lucy mentioned. The research translation into the policy change, into the community or the society change. But it's just a shift in mindset to think about it in terms of the Sustainable Development Goals. And, not everybody might understand that at first, but just, reiterating that we're all working to these things, and this is how this group fits in with this goal.
From the vendor side, as far as libraries go, thinking it from a different way, you guys sort of have the power to influence, if your patrons are interested in SDGs and your researchers are interested in SDGs, then if you start pushing, putting pressure on your vendors to provide SDG, metrics or SDG things within their platforms, it's our job to listen to you because that makes us money, right? That's just the way business works. So certainly think about your vendors as well.
All right, thank you so much, everybody. We're a little bit over time. Oh yeah, go ahead. Did you want to?
No, I didn't know we were over time.
Yeah, we didn't have a lot of time, and we have a lot more to talk about. So all our contact information is up here. Please feel free to get in touch with any of us. We'd love to hear from you, continue the conversation, and thanks so much for coming. Enjoy the rest of the conference.